I don't see a problem. Do you see a problem? There have been dozens and dozens of different channels on this platform talking about this Ohio chemical spill as if it's the end of the world. Well, let me ask some basic questions. Was Norfolk Southern operating illegally? Well, no, they of course had a license. Did they have insurance? Yeah, they sure did. And were they acting in a capitalistic fashion? Well, of course they were. They were trying to make money. That's the rules of capitalism. So many have said, Florida Maquis, we need an investigation into this. We need people to get to the truth of it. Really? What makes you think you're entitled to that? That seems like a very socialist thing, you wanting the government now to send the NTSB and other investigative agencies into this area to divine what's happened to the water, what's happened to the air, whether it's still safe to be in this region. That seems like something you would need government for. You would need the authorities for. And that's really the opposite of the American dream, isn't it? Isn't the American dream to not have government involved at all in your life, whether it be for something good or something bad? Some said Florida Maquis, they were speeding. Many people in the region said that those trains came through there way faster than they Well, don't people speed on highways every single day? Well, yeah, we all do, don't we? And aren't there accidents that are speed related? Of course there are. There are accidents out there that are related to many other things, being distracted or driving too fast for the conditions, even if the speed limit says that you're okay. And think of all of the damage that's been done historically compared to this. You see, when you think about it in little slices, every single accident that occurs that puts coolant into the water, that puts oil or grease or gasoline or diesel or all of the abandoned plastics and rubber and chemicals that come with a vehicle, just one single vehicle, it doesn't seem like much with one accident. But when it happens like this, then people all of a sudden want government to be involved in things. Now, we're going to look a lot farther into this over at Patreon, because it's going to reveal something, a great deal of hypocrisy that occurs in this country. See, when things are going great, people are like, government, get out of the way, get out of the way. I don't want any government around my life. Government's terrible. But when something like this happens, all of a sudden, people cry out, government, government, government. Come fix this. Come make this right. Come bring the truth to light for us. You see, over Patreon, it's only $1. And what do we talk about over there? Psychological operations. Thinking about things in ways that absent ourselves from the emotions of it. You see, when you look at this, when you look at an image like this, the first thing that happens is you become emotional about it. You worry, and you should, I guess, to some extent, worry about the people in the area, worry about their safety, worry about their well-being. But that's not an excuse to not think about it. Say, okay, we've had our emotional moment. We've had our moment to feel. Now let's put our thinking caps on and say, is this the reason government exists? When something like this happens? Why is it that we decry government and we decry their involvement in things like this right up until something like this happens? And then all of a sudden there's this huge outpouring and desire for government to somehow fix it, somehow make it better, bring in the military. Because you'd have to ask yourself a question, and this is at 4.5 minutes, this is going to be where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. Could you really trust a for-profit investigative agency to really get to the truth? Of course you couldn't. Of course you couldn't. If money were involved, they could be bought off. Right? You would have to have somebody investigating this that had no iron in the fire, that had no dog in the hunt, no skin in the game, whatever analogy you want to use, whose sole purpose of getting to the truth was the truth itself with no other motivating factor. And you have to wonder, what governmental agency is going to have that be the case? See, this is PSYOPs. This is PSYOPs 101. I'm not saying what was done as far as that. It looks like an accident, but once again, did they have insurance? Isn't that what insurance is for? It was an accident. And yeah, giant plume, all sorts of chemicals, going to be kind of horrible, but when you compare it to the amount of long-term damage that has been done by the oil industry to the Gulf of Mexico, especially to Venezuela, and we're going to talk about that today, it's a drop in the bucket. It is a drop in the bucket compared to what has been done since all the way back really to World War II, World War I, 100 years at least. What has been done by the oil industry just here? I mean, forget about Africa. If you went to Africa, you would be appalled at what the oil industry has done there, but there aren't the cameras like there are here. But there's a brand new story coming out of Venezuela. It's going to prove something. It's going to prove something that a lot of people are going to shake their heads at. They're going to waggle their fingers at. Venezuela is set to export, 3 million barrels just in February to the United States. 3 million barrels of oil. U.S. to receive 100,000 barrels a day of Venezuelan crude just to us alone. Just that fast. I know a lot of you remember, it was only a few months back when, very strangely, all of a sudden, the U.S. government decided to allow Chevron, they lifted the sanctions on Venezuela, allowed Chevron to go in and work with PDVSA, work with Nicolas Maduro, work with the government of Venezuela to stand up the oil fields. And now, all of a sudden, this heavy, dirty crude, the type of crude that our refineries are really set up for, is flowing back into the United States. Chevron has exported Venezuelan crude oil for use in its Pascagoula, Mississippi refinery and has sold some to Phillips 66 and Valero Energy. Shipping documents show both in the United States. ConocoPhillips is also said to be looking into the possibility of selling Venezuelan crude in the U.S. as a way of offsetting some of the $10 billion it is owed by Venezuela. You watch how fast that goes away. Other companies, too, are looking to get back into the game and negotiate debts with PDVSA. That's the state-run oil company. That Venezuela uses to take the money from the proceeds of the sale of oil and use it to finance its country. You see, here's another piece of evidence knowledge that a lot of people won't accept. The U.S. only has one commodity. That's it. There's only one thing the United States has that everybody else wants. And it's nothing we make. It's nothing we produce. It's just U.S. dollars. It is the one thing we export to the world that they can't get enough of. Imagine going to a grocery. Most Americans can't imagine this. Imagine going to the grocery store and seeing prices for whatever you're buying in American dollars, but then also some other thing that you've never heard of. And more people buying their goods and services, their groceries, with that other thing. The dollar being, we want this other thing. You see, Americans can't understand this. They accept U.S. dollars along with their currencies virtually everywhere in the world. You go to any other country in the world, and you don't necessarily have to convert your dollars into their currency. They'll take your dollars all day long. And this is a big reason why. It's a very strange thing to hear the same people who decry, big oil is corrupt, terrible, horrible, also talk about capitalism. is the height of it. There's only one industry that's more capitalist than this, and we've talked about it at length, and nobody likes to hear about it. It begins with a PROS and ends with a TION. But here's another strange bit of information that goes right along with this. I wonder if we're going to start sanctioning Mexico now and stopping businesses from doing business, stopping U.S. businesses from doing business with Mexico. Mexico cutting off foreigners from its quote-unquote white gold. The government's planning to nationalize deposits of lithium, which is vital for the production of electric vehicle batteries. Foreign companies are set to be excluded from lithium mining in Mexico after President AMLO, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, AMLO, that's what AMLO is if you ever hear that, issued orders for nationalization of the country's deposits to be expedited. The transfer of lithium reserves to Mexico's energy ministry was ordered last April with the signing of a document during an event, and I'm not even going to try this, Bacadehuachi in the state of Sonora, which also designated 2,500 square kilometers in the region as a national lithium mining zone. District borders of the United States. Ambitious program called Plan Sonora. And they are not going to allow for-profit corporations from around the world to mine their lithium. Quote, let's make the nation be the owner of this strategic mineral. What we are doing now is to nationalize lithium so that it cannot be exploited by foreigners from Russia, China, or the U.S. Even though the Mexican government has no experience in mining lithium or commercial production of the metal, instead, a large number of foreign corporations had participated in the exploration of the deposits. So that's going to be kind of a strange thing now. So here's Mexico. Just like all these other countries do, they take their oil, they take this mineral, whatever that occurs naturally inside their borders, pull it out of the ground, and let the government be in charge of it, bring it to market, and take that money and use that for the benefit of everyone. You see, it isn't just Venezuela. That's why I put this together. Mexico has done this with oil. Have we sanctioned them? Have they failed? No. Petrobras, Brazil, they've done this for years. They have nationalized oil. Have they failed? Have we sanctioned them? Do they have an evil dictator that blah, 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 starves his people? No. Aramco, Saudi Arabia, PDVSA is Venezuela, Petroecuador is Ecuador. And so many countries have this. You see, even France has now come out and said what I said a long time ago. For U.S. and Venezuela, miscalculations and shifting priorities. I called this. Go back and look at the very first Venezuela video I did years and years ago. I called it the greatest geopolitical miscalculation in this hemisphere the U.S. has ever made. And now here we are in February, President's Day 2023, and now this is France 24. They are admitting it. They are absolutely admitting it. I'll give you a link to this article that shows it was in fact the sanctions, not socialism, that caused the problems in Venezuela. Were there shortages? Absolutely. Were there people that had no food? Absolutely. But the reason behind it wasn't Nicolas Maduro. It wasn't Hugo Chavez. It wasn't their associations with the Chinese or the Iranians or the Russia. It had nothing to do with that. It had to do with a coordinated attack. U.S. alphabet agencies, the sanctions, and the Colombians all worked together to strip Venezuela of its currency, reintroduce U.S. dollars, and then dump the currency back into Venezuela to devalue it. It was a plan. They were trying to steal Venezuela's oil. They were trying to depose the government so that they could install their own guy, random guy named Juan. We talked about him. And to basically take over Venezuela as a vassal state and use that to leverage against the rest of the world. But it failed. It failed because they misunderstood the nature of the people down there. the people in South America, and this is what's really going to blow the mind of a lot of Americans, they're more nationalistic than we are. Even if they had to go without food, even if they had to go without luxuries, and they had to suffer, they would rather suffer under their own guy than be seen as anyone else's puppet. It has to do with the way the people are down there. They would rather be poor on their own terms than rich on anyone else's. And this is what Washington, D.C. could not get through their head. That what they were trying to bribe the Venezuelan people with wasn't going to work. Because it would have required them giving up their sovereignty. South Americans had their own revolution. When we had the revolution here, we threw off the chains of England. They had their own revolution down there too, where they threw off the chains of Spain. At virtually the same time. Very freedom-loving, even in some cases, much more than us. Freedom-loving, liberty-loving, God, family, and then country in that order. People. And there's twice as many of them, meaning all of Latin America, as there are of North Americans. There's about 600 million, people living in what you would call Latin Spanish-speaking Western Hemisphere. Mexico, Central America, the West Indies, Cuba, South America, put it all together, about 600 million people. That could be our allies again. And here's, the part that a lot of people don't get. After all this happened with Venezuela, Colombia elected a leftist president. We saw what just happened in Brazil. If it was such a bad deal, what happened in Venezuela, why wouldn't they have done what the U.S. instructed them to do and stick with the right-wing capitalist types? Even Biden, in his last speech, said, I'm a capitalist. You see, down here, socialism's a very different thing. It's a very, very different thing. It's actually the path to freedom. You see, they have faith that they have the ability to put people in power that are going to work for them. So I ask, and it comes all the way back to this. How many people have you now heard say, we need to investigate this, and we need to get into this, and we need to figure out who's to blame and point fingers? Well, what's the unsaid statement there? What's the undercurrent? Government investigating agencies. So all of a sudden now the government is riding in on their white horse to protect us from the evil capitalists, Norfolk Southern? Is this the case? And if it's not going to be government, if you're saying, well, no, I don't trust the government to investigate. Okay, if you don't trust the government to investigate, who should? Who should investigate? Who should look into this? Who should figure out who to blame? And who would have the power to fine Norfolk Southern or somehow financially punish Norfolk Southern? Like get a judge to order them to pay so many billions and billions of dollars to the people and for cleanup and for all this. Who would have the ability to order that? Sorry. Guess what? U.S. courts, which is the government. You see, it causes a short circuit in a lot of people's brains. I thought this was kind of hilarious too. So many people for years with the whole previous president thing. The military is going to step in, and the military is going to step in. Who do you think controls the military? The government controls the military. By constitutional authority, they control the military. Not you, not me, not nobody we pay. They're 100% controlled by Washington, D.C. So, just a very, very odd divorcing of logic in a lot of people's minds, which is why we talk about psychological operations at the Patreon channel. And like I said, folks, a lot of people are like, well, why do you charge? It's a paywall, speed bump, keeps the trolls out, keeps the spies out. We can have an adult conversation, take off the gloves, don't have to worry about sensors. And once again, no risk to you, meaning 90 days. 90 days, whether you pay for the year or whether you pay for $1 a month at a time. After 90 days, if it's not for you, full refund, no questions asked. Fully refundable. So, and like I said, if it could be less than $1, I would charge that. If it could be a quarter, I'd charge a quarter just to put up the little speed bump, because that's all it takes. That's all it takes to keep the dual accounts out and the trolls out and the bots out, because they don't have the ability to get over that speed bump. So anyway, those of you who have signed up, thank you so much. I very much appreciate it. God bless. Happy President's Day. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.